welcome to my lecture on how the hybridization of techno-centric and eco-centric design solutions can support the transition to sustainable fashion. I wanted to say a special thanks to Simona Bettore and the STARS project for making this happen. Hi everybody, my name is Lily Hewes. Welcome wherever you're from, all walks of life. Maybe you are starting your own brand, studying, or you're just eager to know a little bit more about sustainable fashion. This lecture will walk you through one of my recent projects and first publications on redesigning sustainable narratives within the fashion industry. And the publication is of course available at the end of the presentation. You can access it via the link on the last page. All right, let's get started. Just to introduce myself a little bit, as I said, my name is Lily Hewes. I am a British fashion designer turned activist, and I'm currently based in Milan. I'm here to share my knowledge of sustainable design development in all aspects of the supply chain. My background is in fashion design, and when I moved to Italy, I decided to do a Master's of Science in designing fashion systems, and I started working closely with local textile manufacturers, taking their industrial waste and turning it into apparel collections. Thanks to Politecnico di Milano, I was introduced to new technologies that transformed my traditional fashion background into what it is today, which is a hybrid between sustainable design ethos and tech, utilizing LCAs, integrating SDGs, and using 3D software to create sustainable projects. So yeah, my main life's mission is to redesign the existing. And through today's lecture, you're gonna have a better understanding of the current climate, DFS, Design for Sustainability, what it is, its evolution, and how we can apply that into real life scenarios. And for those of you that are into fashion, your brands, your products, the supply chain, whatever background you're in, I really hope that you can benefit from this information today. So let's start with some statistics. The consultancy McKinsey & Company estimates that the fashion sector will miss the 2015 Paris Agreement target of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees. To achieve this, the fashion industry would need to cut its emissions from 2.1 billion tons of CO2 equivalent today to 1.1 billion tons by 2030. As you can see in this diagram from IPCC, it is measuring the global and regional impacts on ecosystems attributed to climate change in 2022. Climate change has already altered terrestrial, freshwater, and ocean ecosystems at a global scale. The multiple impacts evident are at regional and local scales you can see here on the next page. For example, water bombs, sea level rise, glacial retreat, methane bubbles, Earth's inhabitable zones, and the displacement of citizens and livelihoods. The list goes on, to be honest, and in 2020, IPCC found that 3 million people were displaced by global climate issues alone. We can and must not proceed to ignore one of the biggest impacting industries on the climate, being the fashion industry. And, what positive steps and guidelines and philosophies can we follow and adopt as designers to pivot in the right direction? And this is why we are here today. So without further ado, I would like to talk a little bit about DFS and its evolution. DFS, or also known as D4S, stands for Design for Sustainability. This is a design approach focused on creating products, systems, or services that contribute positively to environmental, social, and economic sustainability throughout their entire life cycle. It involves considering the long-term impacts of a product or service, from sourcing the materials to its end-of-life disposal, otherwise known as cradle to grave. It strives to reduce negative impacts on environment and society. Here are some of the key principles. Environmental impact reduction. This involves minimizing resource consumption, reducing waste, and preventing pollution by selecting sustainable materials, designing for energy efficiency, and considering the product's full life cycle, including disposal and recycling. Then we have the social responsibility. D4S seeks to improve social well-being by ensuring fair labour practices, creating accessible and inclusive designs, and promoting community engagement and health. The third, economic viability. Sustainability also includes designing products that are economically viable, ensuring that they are cost-effective to produce, affordable to consumers, and offer long-term economic benefits. And the fourth, life cycle thinking. This principle considers the entire life cycle of a product, from design to end of life, assessing the environmental and social impacts at each stage. Design for sustainability aims to achieve a balance between these three pillars: environmental, social, and economic. But I have to add something. Actually, something that we miss and we see often are the cultural and political aspects that come alongside design for sustainability. Meaning, community-wise and social and culturally, how are your designs affecting the local population, for example? So let's look a little bit into the evolution of DFS. 2016 framework that was a crucial pillar in this research. He maps and outlines the existing DFS approaches and sets a framework that helps us visualize how sustainable design has evolved since the early 1900s and how we can improve it. Now, if we really think about it, sustainable design started, way before the 20th century. Traditional indigenous practices were more sustainable than most of the way of life that we live now. For example, using locally sourced renewable materials and designing buildings and products to harmonize with the environment. Then, if we fast forward to the 1970s, that was when we celebrated the first Earth Day in 1917, and it was also to celebrate the founding of the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA. Now, Seskin's framework is particular because over time it shows how to design on a product level and how it has evolved in different social and technical systems, which now primarily has the most potential as an approach for making a product or system more sustainable. Using this graph, we are going to highlight the socio-technical approach. Here, the design approaches are focusing on promoting radical changes on how societal needs such as nutrition, transport, mobility are fulfilled, and thus on supporting transitions to new socio-technical systems. Fulfilling a social function requires a consideration of several institutional, social-cultural, organizational, as well as technological variables simultaneously. These variables include materials, production techniques, infrastructure, culture, social norms, values, cognitive and physical abilities of the user, and the legislation and regulation which govern the production and use of said product or service. It has been estimated that taking action in the design phase can reduce up to 80% of the environmental impact, quoted from the EU in 2020. As we can see here a little bit clearly, the pink outlining fashion activism, somewhere up on the lines of ethical economy, co-design, participatory design, co-designing crafts, social movements and transformations, and this is the area that we are focusing on today. If we are talking about clothing, for example, the focus lands on the designers themselves to adopt a certain design philosophy to ensure the garment's longevity and validity of creation. According to the book Designing Sustainable Clothing Systems by Carlo Vidali in 2022, there are two main approaches that a design can adopt. designing to adopt a life cycle thinking approach, or designing to adopt a functional thinking approach with an environmental perspective. Here we can see the environmental advantages of extending the lifespan of a clothing material. This has been adapted by Professor Vazzauli, and in 2018 it was elaborated on. Design for sustainability. Design for apparel clothing systems. The Textiles Exchange is a global NGO that exists to make sure that the materials used to make clothes are produced in a way that supports our planet, its ecosystems, and its communities. In line with their recent Textiles Fibre report published in 2022, here are 5 key approaches that have been highlighted. 1. Rethink growth. 2. Speed up the shift from conventional. 3. Innovate and collaborate. 4. The best way to predict the future is to create it. 5. Everybody needs to be a leader. Significant acceleration in terms of climate action is needed in order to stay within the 1.5 degrees pathway. Everybody needs to be, can be, and must be part of the solution. Rocca, Jaikai, and Nakazato are 3 designers who are creating their own new circular systems to design within. It's clear that this kind of approach really does create the possibility of having garments for life. This eradicates the likes of Zara producing around 450 million garments a year and releasing approximately 500 new designs per week. How can we make this kind of design culture available to the mass market? And how can we connect people socially through design? What would this hybrid scenario look like in the future? Talking about a more sustainable life cycle approach, how can the use of life cycle assessments, otherwise known as LCA, be applied and work within the fashion environment? How can it help designers, manufacturers, and brands evaluate the environmental impacts of their products throughout the entire life cycle? From raw material extraction to disposal, by integrating LCAs into the fashion industry, you can make more informed design decisions that minimize environmental damage and promote sustainability. For example, you could check out EcoChain, which will help you, I suppose, calculate your product's carbon footprint, or at least start to know a little bit more about how you can facilitate the LCA in your design process. Usually it evaluates a large scope of different definitions of product categories, from raw material extraction through to manufacturing, transportation, the use phase, and the end of life. So when you have some time, check it out. There are many LCA tools to be used. This is just one example of them. When we're talking about designing with new perspectives, there's a lot of, tossing and turning between eco-centric and techno-centric approaches. Now, these are terms that are often used to describe different approaches to environmental ethics and sustainability. And here's how they are defined. Ecocentrism is an environmental philosophy that prioritizes the well-being of ecosystems and the natural world over human interests. It places intrinsic value on all living organisms and the environment, rather than seeing solely the nature in terms of its utility for humans. Versus technocentric. Definition being a perspective that emphasizes the role of technology and human ingenuity in solving environmental problems. Technocentric approaches focus on technological solutions and innovations to manage environmental challenges. The key ideas being technology can be used to overcome environmental problems and improve human conditions. And here you have 2 brands. You have Flavia Rocha and The Fabricant. These are both examples of extremes when it comes to fashion in ecocentric and technocentric environments. Let's get back to why we are here today. We are here to explore the hybridization of both ecocentric and technocentric approaches, which is why I'm letting you into my methodology. Here it shows you how research was conducted and able to build this framework, which of course began with a screening of various articles and essays specializing in DFS origins and evolutions. Then from this selection, 5 keywords were generated and applied to case studies. So an in-depth of evaluation for the case studies was done and then categorized into ecocentric or technocentric practices. The objective was to investigate current state-of-the-art fashion brands adopting sustainable design solutions through ecocentric and technocentric approaches. Subsequent to the evaluation of said case studies, it leads us to the merging of both industries, a hybridization which explores brands adopting both elements, reflecting the twin transition. From a fashion and textile industry perspective, how can ecocentric and technocentric design solutions work synergistically to propose more viable options for a sustainable fourth industrial revolution? Decentralized garmentry. So what can we start to talk about when it comes to creating a new narrative? What is decentralized garmentry? Well, as a definition, it is inspired by the works of designers like Jekai and Yumi Nakazato, who relate to 2 different design solutions through fashion. The idea of modularity and creating apparel that is repairable, interchangeable, and self-built. And 2, representing a new system that doesn't end in the pattern cutting phase of production, but extends to the end use of said garment, creating synergy between the designer and the consumer. Here you can see the works of Jekai and Yumi Nakazato in order to understand modularity on an interchangeable and self-built level. This is the ultimate DIY of clothing. Redesigning the existing, Road to 2050. As you can see, decentralized garmentry, a key word from the research, was placed in the middle of a horizon scanning diagram. Now this is a blue sky research technique, which shows us how decentralized garmentry could be affected by different phenomena in the political, economic, social, cultural, and environmental sectors along the time frame of 2023 to 2030. And we can see the particular areas of impact being societal, behavioral, political, and industrial. If we start with the political-driven design, the EU clamps down on greenwashing issues amongst fashion conglomerates and decentralized niche culture goes mainstream. NGOs gain momentum and brands are given a legal cap on seasonal style creation. Let's go to the economic, for example. Here, with the hybridization of industries, the dichotomy between ecocentrism and technocentrism ends, and the twin transition shifts to hybridized industries. If we look at the cultural, maybe makeshift mentality is on the rise, specifically after the pandemic. There is a call for all things upcycled and personalized retail experiences transform into a full collaboration between brand and consumer. And then the social, the societal impact, the rise of co-creation. This is an example of how to build realities. You scale them over time, and using real data and phenomena, you can plot what possibly could happen. Building realities in 2030. As you can see here, you have the evolution of a 3-stage polarity map. originally used by Barry Johnson in 1992, who argued that many of the current trends in business and industry are polarities to manage and not problems to solve. In 2023, now Johnson's polarity approach to continuity and transformation has been used to build new possible design scenarios. Let's look at phase 1. The vertical axis is measured by eco-centric and techno-centric design solutions, juxtaposed with the horizontal axis of active and passive roles that the consumer plays socially within these dual approaches. As time goes on, the polarity map's vertical parameters change, accommodating the digital transition. Let's have a closer look. Phase 1. We have the division and hybridization, but the scenarios are still yet to be built. Phase 2 is measured on the time frame of 2030 to 2035. As you can see, the scenarios have started to build phenomena, and the scenarios have been named as new environments. Phase 3. By 2040 to 2045, again, they have been updated, and the polarity maps reinforce each other's solutions, and the twin transition explores how digital and green technologies could enable a swift transition to carbon neutral by 2050. The transformation of the vertical axis presents an upgraded role of the ideas in each quadrant, adding depth to each dimension. Here you can see a visual representation of the scenarios, and today we're going to focus on season 0. Season 0. What is it? Well, the background behind 0 scenarios comes from the idea of going back to square one. If we start from 0, there's only one way up. This is an optimistic variable. Each scenario plotted in the previous chapter has been converted into a new narrative through storytelling and visual scenario building. But if we focus on introducing this scenario, it is not only a modular design approach to apparel, but a social instruction that is expected when you buy a design. There are also transferable skills available to learn. Here there is a quick definition of the trends. Do-it-yourself becomes an integral philosophy that is embedded into the product in the early design stages. Patterns are integrated into the product or packaging, making the consumer part of the design process. This is not only a modular design approach to apparel, but a social instruction that is expected that when you buy a design, there are also transferable skills available to learn. Pattern pieces are customizable and interchangeable and accompanied by sewing and repair instructions, which are mandatory from the brand to deliver. Ready-to-wear is the new couture, and this niche of culture, season 0, has become mainstream. The utilitarian style has become the only style adopted, which, thanks to the customizable patterns, letting the consumer actively take part in defining their identity. Circular systems are mandatory to adopt within the supply chain and are enforced by the local government, supported by research sourced from NGOs. As a tangible response, a modular collection or blueprint has been represented as a new systemic approach to the value chain. A 4-piece apparel modular garment designed to be interchangeable, educational, upcyclable, and scalable. Each garment comes with a digital tailored repair model with DIY instructions for the consumers, a built-in service and tool for consumers to learn how to stitch their own patterns, facilitate upgrades, and identify the product's most common wear and tear points. This transparency, facilitated between the consumer and the value chain, is a crucial actuator of social change from a social technical perspective. Sourcing the material was made easy by collaborating with Meta, a local material collection hub here in Milan. They facilitate creative processes and repurpose materials at the service of artists, designers. Spazio-Meta promotes waste reduction and shifts attention to the potential of existing resources. Future Scope, the new flow. Season Zero's business as usual is an upgraded version of the supply chain flow, connecting product development stages with the consumer's end use of the garment. As seen in the diagram, the life cycle doesn't end in waste disposal in any form, but reloops back into the value chain through upcycling. Season Zero is an actuator of change, integrating the social pillar of sustainability into the value chain itself, which creates a more harmonized balance between the economic and environmental and cultural impacts of product development. The value chain concept can help brands identify opportunities for improving efficiency, reducing costs, and enhancing value. The value chain perspective extends beyond the boundaries of a single brand or company because it includes suppliers, intermediaries, and customers at each step of the process. With a more holistic view, Season Zero represents a systemic framework that aims to democratize fashion through the investigation of scenario building. Here are some shots from the collection. As you can see, where the clothing is removable, adaptable, reusable, it can be easily reconstructed and deconstructed, as well as the self-education that comes alongside with making clothes. Building a community with Fashion Revolution, campaigning for good clothes, fair pay, whilst sort of creating and raising awareness around modular items and upgrading and repairing what you already own. And collaborating with local NGOs. It's one of the biggest pieces of advice I can give to you. Thanks to the collaboration that I've had with local NGOs, I've been able to open my eyes to local environmental problems, have unlimited support with my own questions when it comes to how to build a collective, how to build an NGO, what sort of business model should we be using. So really, the more you can reach out, the better. And that is about it. Thank you very much for your attention. Don't think ACT is a really good thing to start to instill into your everyday. You know, think about things, of course, but try to act on ideas. The only way you can act on them positively, I think, is through collaboration, through advocacy, talking to people, talking to your friends, and making those ideas happen, whether they fail or not. The most important thing is giving it a try. So thank you for your attention. Please stay in touch. Here you have some of my details and the link to the publication if you're interested in how scenario building and polarity mapping can predict a cleaner future. Thank you very much. Thesis has finally finished. I feel nostalgia. I wanted to create an environment where clothes could be almost like buildings, placing fashion in this same notion and adapt for different ecosystems without the pressure of buying into multi-key seasons. The project highlights and criticizes the overconsumption and addiction to fashion products and the inability to democratize sustainable fashion on a mass scale. My goal is to make a difference, shift the mindset of the consumer. The potential power that lies with trends could shape a new future of sustainability and ethical practices. Season Zero is a modular clothing set representing a new systemic approach to the value chain. It consists of a 4-piece apparel modular garment designed to be interchangeable, educational, upcyclable, and scalable. After the thesis, you look back and realize how fortunate you were to be completely and fully immersed in a project